Ancient Bongo Wata, written by Rastafari, edited by Joseph Powell, introduction by Jakes Homiak. Acknowledgements. The life work of Rastafari patriarchs or matriarchs is a treasure vault for the incoming generation. This work is an important milestone for those seeking knowledge of Rastafariites of liberty. Special thanks to Joseph Powell for guidance and to Jakes Homiak for the important archive material. Thanks also to Ras Miya Masimba, filmmaker, Ross Matz Burgess for support, Ja Reveal Designs, and Ross Julio for artwork. Full gratitude to the individuals whose pictures I have used in this book. Ras Flaco Tafari. Introduction. The tradition of Bongo Wata, Nyabingi Patriarch. In the history of the Rastafari movement, there has never been any single individual recognized to speak on behalf of all Rastafari. Among the handful of the first evangelists who spread the gospel of the movement, Leonard P. Howell has been the most recognized for his works from the early 1930s through the early 1950s. The movement at large, however, is one that has developed from a stage to stage without being exclusively indebted to the inspiration of any one figure, save for that of His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie. It is the case, however, that we can point to a select few individuals whose ritual careers, by virtue of their age, positioning, and inspirational spirit in cultural works and longevity, were profoundly important as transformational figures in the development of the movement. Such individuals abridged the life of the movement from its early years as so-called cult of outcasts to its present-day existence as an international movement of Pan-African liberation. Bongo Wata, a.k.a. Ras Bonajis, is one such exemplary individual. In the language of the sociology of religion, he is someone who would be called an exemplary prophet. That is, someone who, by virtue of their life works and commitment to a faith, exemplifies its principles almost in excess, in order to establish a model for others to emulate. His life and works can be summarized in several general points. As a young Ras during the 1940s and 1950s, he set an example as an invincible, resolute and uncompromising in his faith, and filled with the intense zeal of Rastafari. He sought out a number of the first evangelists of the Rastafari to know and assess their wise mind, and through this he went on to play a major role in developing the spiritual canon and practices of the Nyabingi order from the early 1950s onward. In his later life, starting in the early 1970s, he would inspire a cohort of local and international seekers to embrace the faith, and in the decades that followed, was clearly the most widely traveled and influential of all Nyabingi patriarchs, until the time of his transition in October of 2000. Trotting on the winepress in yard. Bongo Wata, a.k.a. Henry F. Watson, was born July 1st, 1925, in the parish of St. Mary to parents who were Garveyites. At least one of his parents was of Maroon descent. During the period of the Italian occupation of Ethiopia, 1935 to 1941, he cited Rastafari in his early teens. In those early years, as he once put it, he saw himself continuing the work of the Holy Prophet, Marcus Messiah Garvey, who had come to put the people in remembrance of their African legacy as a source of pride and upliftment for the race. In 1945, by the time he was 20, he began to visit Leonard Howell's Rastafari commune in Pinnacle in St. Catherine, then legendary for its quality of its herbs. There, for several days at a time, he participated in spiritual services of Howell's Ethiopian Salvation Society, rituals conducted by chanting to the rhythms of kumina drums and smoking herbs. This was a practice that he continued episodically over the course of several years. He recalls a number of face-to-face reasonings with the Gong, Howell, himself, and, after his last visit in 1947, Bongo Wata maintains that he returned to Kingston, where he, quote, founded the Nyabingi order, unquote. While Bongo Wata is a major figure in the formation of the Divine Order of Nyabingi, his unvarnished claim as founder of the organization warrants some nuance and interpretation. Contemporaries of the elder have argued that, quote, no one man founded the Nyabingi order, unquote. Rather, its creation was the collective inspiration of many individuals over a period of years. Bongo Wato's claim rests on the fact that during the late 1940s, he acquired a copy of Sylvia Pankhurst's book, The Black International, which identified the King's Order as the Nyabingi. In 1946, he subsequently commissioned Buru drums from the drum maker named Daniel, while living in Boys Town, Kingston. At the time, this was not a practice unique to him as other Rastafari, including Pa Ashanti. Bongo Wata christened his drums as the 7 Millenniacs drums. They would become one of the early sets of Nyabingi drums used in Rastafari congregations in West Kingston to hold services, both in his yard and during street meetings. As noted, other Rastafari, including Pa Ashanti and Bongo Lloyd Moore in Bakawal and Count Ozzy in Rennick's Lodge, East Kingston, were also part of this Buru Nyabingi transition and made similar contributions. Suffice it to note that it was from 1947 to 1953 Bongo Wata maintained a yard on Greenwich Park Road, which became a grounding site for Nyabingi protocols. In 1953 he moved to 9th Street and Trench, where he built a tabernacle in his yard, where the livity continued to be refined. Bongo Wata's 9th Street yard would become the grounding site for a cohort of zealous brethren who identified themselves as Youth Black Faith. The cohort included Brother Arthur, Brother Philip Panhandle, Ross Scarface, and, most notably, as a drummer, Bongo Cloudy, aka Pa Ashanti. This group of brethren ultimately embraced the Dreadlocks Covenant that would become emblematic of the Nyabingi order, along with a number of notable others, including Ross Dermanite and Bongo Bud. The group would become known as the Bonagis, or the Sons of Thunder, after the biblical passage in Mark 3:17. The name Boanerges, however, would come to rest almost exclusively on Bongo Wata as a signifier of his ferocious and centaurian style of charismatic preaching. The group would be among those militant younger Rastafari who sought to create a revival within the wider movement, distinguishing their practices from those of the first evangelists like Howell, Hibbert, and Hines, whose congregations were seen as compromised by various Christian or other negative incrustations. It is more than fair to say that Bongo Wata's 9th Street encampment benefited from the fact that he was a good earner, employed periodically as a steel worker during the construction of the University of the West Indies. Over the years, many brethren lived for periods of time in his 9th Street yard during in the 1950s and 1960s. Ja Stone, Pa, and Ma Shanti, and Bongo Stephen are among those known to have lived with Bongo Wata for periods of time on 9th Street. It was during the 1950s that Bongo Wata and his consorts established the outlines of the Nyabingi canon. While some of these principles have significantly amended over the years, the early Nyabingi creed included multiple convictions that continue to apply in whole or in part today. These include recognition of the Bible and the prophecy as I foundation, showing Emperor Haile Selassie is I creator and redeemer. Overstanding the drum is a weapon for I. We will chant Nyabingi until Babylon walls fall down. Embracing herbs, ganja, is I sacrament given by the Almighty Creator. A determination to fight against 3 unclean spirits, the dragon, politics, the beast, commerce, and the false prophet, religion. A conviction that I culture is not for sale. Acknowledging that there is no resting place in Babylon. I are not here to be comfortable. Struggle and strife is part of our portion while in Babylon. Acknowledging that the pure Ital man does not eat from a woman. These principles were coalescing during the 1950s, a decade during which Bongo Wata was very active, but during which he suffered ongoing persecution for his defense of the sacrament. This included 2 prison sentences, during one of which he was poisoned. His faith was resolute and he persevered. In 1953, he organized a major street march in support of the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya. During that same year, he states that Prince Emmanuel I came to visit him in Trenchtown. Together, they later organized a series of 4 conventions in Akiwal, i.e. part of Bakawal, in 1954 through 1957. The 1955 gathering was held to celebrate the silver 25th anniversary of His and Her Majesty's coronation. All of these served as a prelude to the well-known All-Island Convention held there in March of 1958. Bongo Wata recalls playing a major role in that event. One of the highlights of his life came in 1966 at the reception given at the Sheraton Hotel by Emperor Haile Selassie I during his state visit to Jamaica. He noted that the emperor sent an emissary, a police inspector named Gordon Langdon, to him to ask him why he wore his head in dreadlocks. Although he knew His Majesty knew the answer to the question he had asked, he nevertheless quoted from number 6 to the emperor's representative. When informed of the answer that Bongo Wata had given, His Majesty stated before the Jamaican elites gathered there, "Leave them, the Rastafari, alone, for they know what they are doing." Bongo Wata asserts that there was a clear logic in the fact the emperor instructed the police inspector to solicit his response, as that individual was well known to be hostile to the Rastafari, as were police in general. Hence it represented a teachable moment. For his part, Bongo Wata took the emperor's words as a mandate to spread the message and precepts of the Nyabingi order. Yachting abroad. In 1973, after waves of political violence and turmoil had upset life across West Kingston, Bongo Wata left Trenchtown and relocated to Goldsmith Villa, not far from the university. This put him in touch with a number of students from other parts of the Caribbean who were influenced by the spread of the Black Power ideology that had accompanied Walter Rodney's tenure there in the late 1960s. Among such individuals were Ras Franchi Maluma of Antigua and Aikal Tafari of Barbados. During the 1973 to 1974, Aikal lived with Bongo Wata while he was also engaged with Michael Manley's youth development initiatives. These Pan-African connections would serve as the conduits that initiated Bongo Wato's international trotting and positioned him as the most influential patriarch in the spread of Nyabingi liberty and practice. In April of 1975, he accompanied Aikal Tafari to Barbados on the first known international Nyabingi trot, thus planting the seeds for the order in the Eastern Caribbean. 8 years later, following the Second Rastafari International Theocracy Assembly, RITA, in 1983, held on Mona campus, Bongo Wata led a Nyabingi delegation to the Eastern Caribbean, which included stops in Antigua, St. Vincent, and the Union Islands and Barbados. This mission was prevented from landing in Grenada due to the upheavals of the overthrow of the Bishop government. He was accompanied on that mission by Bongo Time, Pa Shanti, and Ras Ibo Shanti. That mission had a major impact on the fledgling communities in the Eastern Caribbean, including in Grenada, and would ultimately lead to the founding of the Caribbean Rastafari Organization, the CRO. The following year, in 1984, Bongo Wata traveled to Toronto, Canada, with Ras Ayaton and Ras Ivil Wright as the central figure of the Voice of Thunder trot. That month-long program, organized by Sister Carol Yanni and Sister Masani Monteg, at York University had as its objective to educate the Canadian public about the nature of Rastafari philosophy and practice. It came in the midst of Canadian concerns over Jamaican immigration in general, and Rastafari in particular, marking increased levels of misunderstanding and conflict during the 1980s between the Canadian, U.S., and British states and members of the Rastafari movement. 2 years hence, in 1986, Bongo Wata trod to London to participate in a Rastafari focus at the Commonwealth Institute. He followed up that mission with a trod to St. Lucia during the same year. During that trod, which included Ras Ivy Tafari, he clarified various Nyabingi protocols and consecrated the tabernacle at Vaux Fort St. Lucia. In 1988, Bongo Wata was one of some 20 Rastafari who were scheduled to trot to New York and Washington, D.C. as part of the, quote, Rainbow Circle Throne Room, unquote, mission sponsored by the Smithsonian and organized in part by this writer. However, he withdrew at the last moment over disagreements with other elders on the trot. In the 1990s would continue to be an active decade for the Patriarch. In 1992, following the centenary trod to Ethiopia, Bongo Wata made trod to Eastern Caribbean, again to St. Lucia. In 1994, he trod to the ICOM Ross gathering in Miami on the Seminole Reservation, after which he traveled to Washington, D.C. and New York. In May of 1994, he traveled with Bongo Spear of Barbados to Lenlydorp, Suriname, to participate in a conference organized by the Caribbean Council of Churches, the CCC, focused on the indigenous African aspects of spiritual practice found within the Caribbean practice of Christianity. In 1996, he again traveled with Bongo Spear, this time to Geneva, Switzerland, to defend the cause of repatriation and to secure observer status for the Rastafari movement within the United Nations Social and Economic Council. That mission did, in fact, secure observer status in the UN for the movement. In 1997, Bongo Wata would travel to Guyana with a larger contingent that would include Bingi Irie Ians, Bongo Joe Bernard, Sister Mitzi, and daughter Diane.
Ras Ivy and Ras Ibo Ashanti and Iral Tafari from Barbados.
The first Nyabingi Patriarch to trod to South Africa. In July 1996, Bongo Wata made his first trod to the African continent, traveling from London to Shashamane for the opening of the Nyabingi Tabernacle. This event marked the completion of the Centenary Tabernacle project, launched in 1992 on the Emperor's 100th Earthstrong. He then returned to London for 2 months and, in October of 1996, trod to South Africa, becoming the first Nyabingi Patriarch to make such a trod. He traveled to Cape Town with a delegation of brethren and sistren from London and Birmingham, where they were met by Ibo Ashanti and brethren and sistren from Johannesburg and Palm Springs. In Cape Town, Bongo Wata would spend a good deal of time with members of the Marcus Garvey camp in the township of Felipe on the Cape Flats. His presence there generated enormous interest not only in South Africa proper, but in Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Namibia. In Cape Town, he was hosted on Bush Radio, which helped to spread the news of his trod. Sister Carol Yanni, my late research partner, followed the impact of Bongo Wata's sojourn in South Africa when she traveled there during the late 1990s and early 2000s. She noted that wherever you go in Rastafari communities in South Africa, Ras Bonaji is known as the first Nyabingi Patriarch to make a mission there. They've even heard about him in the Nyabingi community in Swakopmund, Namibia, even though Namibia has been kind of left out of the loop of Rastafari networking in southern Africa. In circulating a memorial tribute to Ras Bonaji following his transition in October 2000, Sister Carol noted that Ras Bonaji was known across southern Africa through word about his character and works, as well as through his image. In the South African community of Kinshasa, a place where Rastafari settlements is inspirationally located on a hilltop, She noted that near the entrance to the community on the outside wall of a shop was a striking painting of Ras Bonaji that could be seen from a distance like a landmark. Ras Bonaji never made it to Kinshasa, but shortly after his transition, the community there was gathered to celebrate his life in their tabernacle. Sister Carol went on to say that Nyabingi houses across South Africa are marking this occasion Friday night, as they are in Zimbabwe and Botswana. At the Marcus Garvey camp in Cape Town, where Ras Bonaji spent so much time, the Nyabingi started with the news of Ras Bonaji's transition. The life of Bongo Wata, aka Ras Bonaji, is a testament to the fact that Rastafari is an African energy that manifests in the fullness of time. As Sister Carol has written, his works were to, quote, awaken and rise up a Nyabingi energy. With his steady chants and beats on the bass drum of do good, do good, do good, he wielded the sword of the Nyabingi fire to strike fear in the heart of those who would pervert the teachings of Rastafari. Rastafari is not for sale, unquote. For such cause, the tradition of the venerable Patriarch Bongo Wata will be remembered as having had an unequaled impact upon the internationalization of the divine order of the Nyabingi and its foundational precepts. June 23, 2021, Compliments of IRAP, the International Rastafari Archives Project. Co-founders Carol Diani and Jakes Homiak. We do give thanks as we conclude the introduction of the book Ancient Bongo Wata, Ras Flacco Tufari, the author.